this morning comes from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 24. This is the parable of the prodigal son. Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Give me my share of the inheritance.' Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed the pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting, because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate." The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Well, we just got back last night from a week-long vacation in the mountains of North Carolina. And no offense to the beach people, but I am definitely a mountains person. This was actually the first vacation that Kara, Auden, and I got to take just the 3 of us together. She is 4 years old, Auden, not my wife. She is 4 years old, and we've taken plenty of trips with family or to family, but this was our first chance to just go away, the 3 of us. And I have to say, it has been super fun to see all of your trip pictures and hear about your trips. They said that we had the Great Resignation that I've seen this summer is called the Great Vacation, because some of you have had like 2 or 3 vacations that have been postponed, and they all happened this summer, and so good for you. It's been fun to see your pictures. We had a family wedding out in Arizona at the beginning of the month. We got to see the Grand Canyon and go to Sedona, and then this week we got to explore the mountains and lakes and waterfalls of North Carolina. But I have to say, honestly, the best part of it, and this is going to sound super sappy and cheesy, but it's so true. The best part was what? Seeing my daughter see all these things for the first time, right? Seeing her fall in love with a creek, just a little bit of cold water with some rocks, and that was all she needed for 2 hours. When you give her like an activity book or an iPad and she's done in 5 minutes, it's really amazing what can happen. And she was such a trooper. She did so well in airports and car rides and flights and standing in line and being away from home and long days and not having all the things she's used to. She had her moments. She is 4 after all. But watching her experience all these things, it just makes you want to hit pause. Have you ever been in moments like that? You just want to stay there forever. You just want your kids or your grandkids or your niece or nephew or even your marriage relationship, your friend, like whatever. You just want the moment you're in to last for forever. Getting to watch her grow and her curiosity and independence, to go to this creek and say, "Why don't you go climb on those rocks?" And she's, "Really? I can go over there by myself?" Yes, you can. Now, of course, there are challenges to being around a curious and independent 4-year-old, right? Anyone know that? Their tendency to get distracted. Their tendency to, I can go check out that, which means I can go check out that, and I can go around that bend. Or their tendency to stay behind looking at a bug that's not actually a bug, and you have moved on to another thing, right? And thankfully, we didn't get separated on either trip. And I wrote that line on Wednesday and prayed the whole rest of the week that it would still be true. And it was, although it got dicey at the Atlanta Aquarium on Friday. They go back to school tomorrow, and so I think every child in Atlanta was there on Friday with us. Which we were honored that we got to see them all. But we didn't get separated, but because it's always a possibility, not just on vacation, it's a possibility at Publix, right? when you have a small child, it's wise to have a plan, right? To come up with a plan. And so we have a plan, and we've worked on that plan. We drilled that plan at the dinner table in the weeks leading up to it. We practiced it. We didn't leave her behind, but we practiced it at the airport in Orlando. We talked it through on the drive to the Grand Canyon. We talked it through in the lobby of the aquarium. And our family plan comes from a woman named Susie Allison. She's a former K and first grade teacher. She has a master's degree in early childhood development. She's a parenting author and runs the Instagram account Busy Toddler. And her plan has 3 steps. The first one is stay still. Stay still, because a wandering child is much harder to find. Step 2, and this is the heart of the plan, find a family. Right? If you ask a 4-year-old to just find an adult, they suddenly have to perceive everything. And if you can just tell them to look for an adult with a child or an adult with children, look for a family. It's not guaranteed, but they're likely a safer option, someone who understands and is empathetic and willing to help. And then the last step is be loud. As you are looking for that family, say, I am lost. I need help. I don't know where my parents are. Activate as many eyes and ears around you as possible to create a safe situation and to find someone that will help. And interestingly, that's not just for the kid. It's for the parent as well. If you get separated, you get loud too. I don't know where my child is. She is this high. She's wearing this. She looks like this. She's most likely to be doing cartwheels. Whatever will help them identify your child. Be loud. And again, thankfully, we didn't have to employ this plan, but we kept thinking through this plan. And for me, as a natural worrier, it was like a little bit of anxiety every time we went through it. But the interesting thing is, I was planning on preaching on something else until Wednesday at nap time. I'm not a napper. The girls are nappers, so they were napping, and I was sitting in a rocking chair underneath the maple tree in the mountains. And God said, you know what you should teach everybody? I'm attributing it to God, but I just feel, you know what? If you get lost, find a family. That's not just good for a 4-year-old. I think it's good for us too. If you get lost, find a family. Because I don't know about you, but I have certainly felt lost at different times in my life. I mean, literally lost. Like yesterday, even with Google Maps, I still got lost around the Atlanta airport because I have a terrible sense of direction. But how many of you have ever felt lost in some area of your life, some season of your life? And it can happen in so many different areas of life, personally. Have you ever felt lost in your identity? You don't really know who you are. You don't know what your purpose is in life, why you're here, and what you're supposed to be doing. Speaking of that, there's the vocational aspect of life. How many of you have ever been in a job and you just wake up one day and realize, what am I doing? Why am I here? Am I doing anything good? Am I doing this for the right reasons? Am I in the right job? Am I using the talents and gifts that God has given me? We can also feel lost relationally. How many of you have ever had a family or a friend relationship or a romantic relationship where it just feels like we're just walking in circles or something is broken and I don't know what it is? And then, of course, as someone who sort of reads and prays professionally, I have felt lost spiritually many times, coming up against passages of the Bible that don't make a lot of sense or that seem to teach something contrary to what I think would make sense. How many of you have ever had doubts or questions or challenges in life that really push against some aspect of your faith or understanding of God? Or how many of you have ever just felt like, whoa, humanity as a whole is lost? How many of you have ever turned on the news at one time or another or scrolled Facebook and just been like, we are way off track? Being lost, it's disorienting, it's uncomfortable, it's terrifying. You feel like you've lost your bearings. You feel like maybe the foundation that has held you solid, the anchor that has held you in place is suddenly gone. The things or the people, the ideas, the beliefs, the worldviews that we used to ground ourselves in have disappeared, and we feel detached from them. And perhaps the worst part about it is that it can happen so suddenly, can't it? You can be totally secure and totally fine one day, and then the next day or the next moment, it just is gone. This parenting expert whose lost kid plan we employ in our family, she actually lost her own kid at Disney in March of this year. She's the expert, and she lost her 5-year-old. They were coming off of a ride and wires got crossed as to where they were going. And there were 2 parents but 3 kids, and then they had to go get their stroller, which is always a mile away. And then 2, they force you now into an app, and so the parents are on the app trying to figure out where to go next, and they turn around and their 5-year-old is just gone. It can happen so fast. It isn't the same true in our lives. You wake up one day and your life has changed. I remember 2.5 years ago, as the pandemic was just getting started, and we thought it'd be 14 days. Stay home for 2 weeks and it'll all be over. And yet I was reading this article that said, chances are pretty good 80% of us are going to get this before it's over, and we're approaching that. If you ever want to reliably find me, go to the Starbucks on 46 Sunday mornings at 6:30. There's no other place in my life that I am always in the same place at the same time, but that's one of them. It's how I prepare to come to worship. It's not my house, it's not my office, it's where I go to specifically prepare for Sundays. And I just remember, the Sunday before we shut down, coming out, and there were no cars on the road, and it was like one of those post-apocalyptic movies, what are we heading into? Or in February, you remember, the war in Ukraine, just at least to us on this side of the world, just seemed to come up out of nowhere. Your world can change. One day you're healthy, the next day you have a diagnosis. One day you have a job, the next day you don't. One day someone in your life is just fine, and the next day they're not. How many times has the lives of the people you count on changed? How many of you have ever encountered a question or a challenge or a perspective for the first time that has destabilized how you see the world or how you understand your faith? And like getting literally lost, all it takes is one wrong turn or missing a turn, heading in the same direction for just a little bit too long, or making an assumption about where a road leads and suddenly it's not leading where you thought it would. Because that's the other crazy part about being lost, is that the vast majority of the time we get lost, we actually know where we came from and how we got there, right? We know how long we drove, and this we turned right here and we turned left here. Or in life, I did this job for this long, and then I left and I did this, but that now we're lost. Being lost isn't always about what happened in the past. Oftentimes we know exactly where we came from. Being lost is about not being sure where you are now, and especially where to go next. Being lost is about not being sure of the future. And of course, we can be lost for a long time. How many of you have come to the realization driving that you missed a turn a long time ago? You can be lost for a long time before you realize it, but in that moment you realize that that is a critical moment, because every decision you make from that point on either helps you get found or what? Gets you more lost. Which is why I would argue, even as adults, we should have a plan for what to do when we get lost. Not if we get lost. Because it can happen, and it does happen, and I have lived long enough, and I have pastored long enough to know that all of us at some point in some way are going to feel lost. It might not always be catastrophic. It might not be life-defining. It may be just a short season or one particular situation that wraps up relatively quickly, but we will all at some point or another be lost. And in fact, it's so foundational, so important that Jesus told 3 stories in a row about things that were lost. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the first one. There's a shepherd who has 100 sheep. 99 of them are safe, but one is lost. And what does the shepherd do? He leaves the 99 to go find the one. In the second story, there's a woman who lost a coin. And what does she do? She turns her whole house upside down to find the coin. And then the third story is about something far more valuable than a sheep or a coin. No offense to sheep. A lost son. Jesus said a certain man had 2 sons. And the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." Then the father divided his estate between them. And soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a faraway land. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. Here we see how the prodigal son ended up getting lost. Being lost is about being separated from our foundations and all of our connections, and we can see this son choosing to intentionally cut all of those ties. I mean, he asks his father for his inheritance. When do you generally get an inheritance? When someone dies. So essentially, he said to his dad, "Let's pretend you died, And can I have all my stuff now? What's something you can't do with a dead person anymore? Just about anything. Talk to them, hug them. He's basically saying to his dad, I'm done with you. I don't need you anymore. I don't want you anymore. Let's just pretend you're dead and everything that comes with it, including all my stuff. And then the son separates even further by gathering everything up and going to what Jesus calls a faraway land. He could have literally named a place that was far away, but that wasn't the point, that it was someplace specific. What was the point? Anywhere but home. I want to get as far from home as I can. That's what Jesus literally calls it, a faraway land. I want no connection to home. I mean, there's no internet, there's no carrier pigeons, there's no text messages or email. This is a son wanting to get as far away from everything as he can. And speaking of home, what do you think inheritance looked like in Bible times? Could you just Zelle an amount of money or write a check to somebody? No, what did it entail? Livestock, land, buildings, objects, right? Can you pack all that up and carry it with you and spend it in a faraway land? No, you can't. So what did the son do in order to be able to take a bunch of money with him to a faraway land? He sold it all. Give me half of all of our stuff, and then I'm going to sell it all. Can you imagine being the father and the older brother, and suddenly your family land is just cut in half and gone because your younger punk brother just wanted to go party? And if you go spend it all, can you come back and buy it back? No, he's saying, I am done. I'm done with this family. But interestingly, does the son feel lost yet? No. He knows exactly what he's doing. This is great. I get all this money. I get to go spend it on myself. This is going to be wonderful. These are intentional, conscious decisions that the son is making. He's lost. We know it. His family knows it, but he doesn't know it yet. He thought he knew where this was all going to end up. Here's how the story continued. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. Does this end up how this son imagined it would? Do you think when he took all of his stuff and sold it all and headed off that he thought, this is great, I'm going to end up in a pigsty? You think that was the plan? No. He ends up lost. And notice, too, it wasn't just that he blew all his money, but then what happened? There was a food shortage. Sometimes us getting lost is at least contributed to by things that are outside of our control. How many of you have learned something about control over these last 2 years? 2019 was a great year for control. I felt really in control. But it turned out to be an illusion. So much of what we think we have control over, we don't. And especially when we are living on the edge, when we are right on the edge of being lost, all it takes is one gust of wind or one nudge from something on the outside, and we tumble over. And what's his first attempt at finding a way forward? Well, I'll figure it out myself. I'll just get a job. I'll work my way out. I don't need any help. And what ends up happening? He ends up even more lost, right? Now, he's in a faraway land, but this story is told by a Jewish rabbi to a Jewish audience. What does ending up working for pigs mean? You are in the worst possible condition. Pigs were no good, unclean. We don't touch them, we don't feed them, we don't eat them, nothing. And this guy ends up so low, he's jealous of the pigs for having something to eat. And it says no one gave him anything. He's not just disconnected from his family. He's not even connected to anyone in the place he chose to live. He is so disconnected that he had literally nowhere to turn. Not everyone around you, when you are lost, is a safe or a good option who is going to help you. The story continues. When he came to his senses, which is Jesus' way of saying, I think he finally realized he was lost. And from here on out, Let's see what he does. When he came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food? But I'm starving to death. I'll get up and go to my father." And this first step reminds me of the first step in the lost child plan, which is stop wandering. Stop wandering. Now, for a kid who's lost, it's literally stay still, stay where you are, because a wandering person is much harder to find. And that's not just true of kids at theme parks. How many of you have ever gone to Target and been like, "Honey, I'm going to go check this and then I'll find you"? Yeah, right. And you end up circling each other for 45 minutes and you're texting, "Where were you? I thought you were at the," and you get lost. But when we wander without a plan or a destination, what generally happens? You get more lost. If you put someone in an empty field and tell them to walk in a straight line, can you do it? If there's a tree or a flag or a building, you absolutely can. But what if your only sense of direction is inside of yourself? What do you end up doing? Weaving, going in circles? You can't, it's literally, for some reason, physically impossible to walk in a straight line if you don't have something outside of yourself that you were shooting for. What was everything this young man, where was everything he was shooting for? Inside of himself, his own pleasure, his own comfort, his own desires. And he just keeps getting lost. And he would just turn to whatever's closest. I'll take this job. I'll work for this person. Even with the pigs, sure, I'll do that. Certainly by then, someone will help me. But he ends up starving in a pigsty. When we feel lost, especially if it's the terrifying kind of loss, it's really tempting to take the closest thing, the first thing, the easiest thing. But that's not always the wisest thing. Another reason that a wandering child is a bad idea is because if you are the parent that lost your child, or the person that lost your keys or your glasses or your phone, where's the first place you look? The last place you saw it, right? You're going to return to the last place you were with the thing you lost. And so if the kid stays there, a much higher percentage of the parent is going to come back there. And this is kind of what the prodigal son does. He doesn't stay put, but where does he return? He returns to the last place where he had been found. He returned to the last place where he had any sort of foundation or connection. And something interesting happens. He says, "I will get up and go to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and he went to his father." Notice he doesn't come home expecting to be welcomed back as a son. He realizes he's messed up and that's probably not available to him anymore. And I don't think this is pure expedience, like I'm starving here, they eat there, I might as well go there. Because he comes home intending to do what? To ask for forgiveness. He knows he's burned bridges. He knows that this is a relationship to fix. But he also knows the goodness of his family. Because he's not coming back expecting to be a son. He's coming back expecting to be someone that his family can care for. And what was his experience growing up? That his family cares about people. That they take care of their employees. His father even took care of him when he asked for the most offensive thing he could ask for. But his father cared. He knows he's lost. He needs a safe option. He needs someone who will see and understand his situation. And he knows his father will do at least that. And that is the heart and soul of this plan. If you get lost, find a family. And again, for a child, this just narrows down the options. Because you know one of the cool things about families is we're everywhere. You know, when you're at Disney, the employees look different, like every 10 feet. If you go to Publix, some employees are in sweaters, some are not. If you go to Target, don't ever wear a red shirt to Target. They'll just assume you work there. I've made that mistake. But it's pretty easy to find an adult who's caring for a child. And an adult caring for a child is, statistically speaking, more likely to be safe, more likely to be understanding, and more willing to help because there's an understanding, there's an empathy, right? I understand what this child and that parent must be going through, and I'm going to do for them what I hope someone would do for me. Once we got our dog, I now stop for every dog I see running loose because I hope someone else would do that for me. And it certainly isn't true of every church or everyone in a church, but the way church is supposed to work is that we give up an hour or an hour and a half of our time to be in this room because we know what it was like to be lost and we know how good it is to be found. Isn't that why we're here? Because somewhere else we were lost. But the person that this community worships is the one who found us. And so I hope that when you feel lost, that you would find a family. And as a pastor, I hope that family would be a church. And as the pastor of Lakeside, I hope that family, that church, would be Lakeside. Because I hope you recognize that we're a community of people who were lost and have been found. But the sad thing is that sometimes the opposite happens, doesn't it? When we come to a realization that we're lost, when we've lost our bearings, when we've lost our job, when we've lost someone, when a marriage is strained or failing, when we have doubts or questions about our faith, when the addiction, the thing we thought we had beat, comes back. I have seen so many people, instead of coming to a church family like this, do what instead? Back away. Back away. Back away. Because there's this voice inside of all of our heads working against the mission of places like this, that when we are at our toughest and we are at our lowest, like to tell us that the people in this room have been found and we've got it all figured out together and we've got it all put together, and so you are not welcome here anymore because this is for a room of people who have it all together. Friends, if you get lost, find a family. But of course, the challenge is that asking for help and admitting you're lost can be embarrassing. And that's why the last step is so important. Be loud. Be loud. Yes, you will draw attention to yourself. And yes, you will appear to not have it all together. And yes, you will be admitting your need for help. But when you're lost, what is the most important thing? Being found or preserving your pride and reputation? When your child is lost, what is more important? That every stranger around you assumes that you're a perfect parent or that you find your lost child? There's a reason 12-step meetings begin with, "Hello, my name is, and I am an alcoholic," or whatever it is. Being loud and clear about who we are and what we need. And the parenting expert whose plan we follow, she likes to say frequently, good kids get lost and good parents get separated from their kids. It happens. And sometimes it happens because, like with the prodigal son, someone makes a dumb decision. But when the prodigal son gets back, what happens? Does he get scolded? Does he even get hired? No. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son." And this was the point in the rehearsed speech where he was going to ask for a job. But before he could even continue, his father cuts him off. But the father said to his servants, "Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. The son is loud and clear. I am lost and I need help. He's not hampered by his pride. And you know what? Neither is the father. In this culture, a father, an elder figure, especially an elder male, would never run. And you certainly wouldn't go out to meet the son who asked for the most offensive thing possible. You would wait for him to crawl in on his hands and knees and grovel before you. Even the father doesn't let his pride get in the way. And what does the father do? He celebrates. That's how all three of the lost parables end. The shepherd finds the one lost sheep and brings it back, and what do? I've already told you, they celebrate. The woman finds her lost coin, and what does she invite the whole town to do? Celebrate. Being found wasn't an occasion for scolding, it was a time for celebration. And we're not going to read the rest of this parable, but if you're familiar with it, you might know that there's sort of a coda to this parable. And that is, there is one person who is not celebrating. Who is that person? The older brother. Why not? Because he thinks he's never been lost. And this lost brother doesn't deserve all this stuff. What stops us from celebrating with other lost people? Thinking that we were never lost in the first place. But what does his father tell him? Boy, you've been lost this whole time. Because all of this has been available to you. And you can't see it. When we encounter those who are lost, we have two choices. We can either help them be found and celebrate, or we can get up on our high horse. So I want to ask you, are there any areas of your life right now where you feel lost, in big ways or small ways? And if so, what are you doing about it? Are you doing anything intentional, or are you wandering? Who are you looking for? Who are you looking to? The nearest thing, the closest thing, the easiest thing, the thing that's the most secret, the thing that will maybe work but also protect my pride? Or are you actually looking for the help that you need? Are you being loud and clear? Are you asking for the help that you need, or are you expecting everyone around you to read your mind? That's not one of the things I got when I was ordained, although sometimes I think people think I got that. Well, I raised my eyebrow when I came through the communion line. Okay, sure. Should have called, I'm sorry, I apologize. But we do this with our friends and family too, don't we? We wait for someone else to read I was moping. Well, I thought you were just tired. Be loud and clear about what you need. And of course, if you're not lost right now, now's a pretty good time to think through your plan. What are you going to do when it happens? What relationships do you need to invest in now so that when the time comes, you can count on them? We are going to continue streaming worship for forever, and I fully believe that worshiping from home is a valid place, but there is also something about being in this room. And if you are home because you need to be home, or because for whatever, that's great, that's wonderful. But we would also love to have you here if possible, so we can build those relationships. And of course, on the flip side of things, we aren't just people who can get lost, but what are we here? We are a family that other lost people can come and find. Are we loud and clear that we are a place for lost people? Are we loud and clear that we are a place people can come for help? As we head out of the summer and back into our rhythms for school and work and all the things that come with the academic year, new people will find their way here. When the school year starts, there are always people who end up looking for a church, because this year we're going to get into it. Or January 1st, people make resolutions because they want to come back to church, or they want to find a church. Or maybe people moved here over the summer, the school year starting, now's the time to find a church. There will be people who come here. How are we going to receive them? Will we be the father who runs out and embraces them, or will we be the brother that says, oh, so you're back. It's about time. And as you return to school and work and sports and volunteering and going to the breweries downtown or whatever it is you do on a regular basis, you are going to run into people, and some of them will be lost. Are you willing and able? Do you have your heart and mind and eyes and ears and spirit open to help them be found? Do you have the confidence and the comfort level to say, look, I don't know how to help you, but I'm a part of a family that might be able to help you? So my hope and prayer is that in the same way the Lord ingrained this on my heart this week, that you would leave today with this ingrained on your heart. If you get lost, find a family.